The Toaster is the 12th episode of the 3rd season of Everybody Loves Raymond. This is directed by Steve Zuckerman, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And this is a Christmas episode. It's not necessarily the most festive, but there's still enough Christmas in it. And it starts off with this beautiful snowy shot of the house, and then we have the bedroom scene with Ray panicking about the toaster that he's giving his parents. Debra's parents are also getting the toaster. Robert's getting the toaster. It's basically a toaster with an engraving on it saying Merry Christmas from Geoffrey, Michael, Ali, Debra and Ray. And it's a thoughtful gift. I personally wouldn't want to receive it, but the thought was definitely there. And I will say this and another scene I feel were quite slow. Other than that, pacing is brilliant, but this scene I feel went on way longer than it needed to, and there's another scene in a little bit. We then cut to Debra's parents' house. Debra and Ray and the kids are spending Christmas there, and they give them the toaster. They really like the toaster. Robert then comes over with a woman called Leann. She's played by Drenda Spohnholtz. They'd been skiing. Robert said he liked the toaster as well. And then we are back at Ray and Debra's house, and Marie and Frank still haven't come over since Ray gave them the Christmas gift, just before Christmas, of course, since they were at Debra's parents' house. And while Debra is delighting in the fact Marie and Frank haven't come over in a few days, Ray is worrying because they haven't said thank you for the toaster. Did they not like the gift? And Marie does come over and she kind of passively says, yes, thank you for the gift. And then she starts talking about something else. Ray's still not satisfied. So he goes over to Frank and asks about the gift, and all Frank can really say is, your mother wanted a coffee maker. This is the other scene that I think was a little too slow. It just went on for longer than it needed to. Marie then comes over and we find out that basically they unwrapped the toaster, they didn't take it out of the box, and they went down to Bloomingdale's to exchange it. And I'm quite surprised that Bloomingdale's exchanged it since it had a custom engraving on it. Usually that's not allowed. I don't know Bloomingdale's returns policy, but I was surprised by that. But nevertheless, they exchanged it for a coffee maker. And Ray points out it had an engraving on it. And Marie still tries to argue that the coffee maker was a better gift, which I have to say, I agree with that, but Marie doesn't necessarily apologise for what they did. But we'll find out in a little bit that actually it's something that has maybe sat with her. We then cut back over to Debra and Ray's a little while later. Robert is there, and Debra makes an interesting point. She suggests that it's not so much that Marie exchanged the gift, it's that Ray is concerned about wanting their approval. And by exchanging the gift, it's kind of not approving of the gift, and by extension, not approving of Ray's choices, which I thought was quite thought-provoking. I think that made a lot of sense. And then we're down at Bloomingdale's, and Frank and Marie are trying to exchange it. And honestly, they exchanged the coffee maker, even though it had been used. If that is Bloomingdale's policy, fantastic. That's brilliant. And they're looking through all of the toasters to try and find the one that had been put back on the shelf with the engraving. And somebody else who works there comes along, tries to stop them from doing this, and Marie is trying to talk to him, and Frank tells her to be quiet, and Marie's response was, I'm not just some trophy wife. Frank's expression at that moment was fabulous, and he responds, what contest in hell did I win? And they carry on opening the toasters. Frank then goes through to the stockroom, where we just have wall-to-wall hundreds of toaster boxes, and as luck would have it, a woman actually comes into Bloomingdale's at that point to have the engravings on the toaster that she received changed. And it turns out she received a toaster from her son, and it had the engravings on. Obviously, it was the toaster that Marie and Frank had exchanged, but this woman had just assumed that whoever did the engravings got the names wrong. And it was actually meant to be her grandkids' names and stuff. And I presume she hasn't actually spoken to her son. Her son is going to be very surprised when he goes to her house and finds that there's an engraved toaster with their names on it. And of course, Marie realizes this and she grabs the toaster and security comes along. And apparently the security guy is actually played by Richard de Romano, who is Ray Romano's brother, which is quite interesting. And we then cut to Debra getting a phone call, and she tells Ray he needs to go into Bloomingdale's because the phone call was about the destruction of property and the possible theft of a toaster. And Ray's response, they do care. So Ray was quite happy. It's an interesting enough episode. As I said, it's not the most festive episode out there, but it's absolutely fine and it works well enough as a narrative. It's maybe not my all-time favourite, and it's definitely not my all-time favourite Christmas episode. But that being said, the narrative is good. I think there are some good messages in there about maybe not trading in the gift somebody's just given you, particularly on the day you get it, which is what Marie did. But also, do people really want an engraved toaster? I don't know, maybe some people do. I personally wouldn't. But nevertheless, it's a good episode. Quite enjoyed it. Not an all-time favourite, but the toaster is still pretty enjoyable.